Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey,
I'm really
Katie. Thank you for having me.
awesome. And please remind me, where are you tuning in from?
So I'm in Parkville, Missouri, which is a little suburb of Kansas City. So I'm right on the state line between Kansas and Missouri.
Okay, awesome. Very, very cool. Well, you recently taught a wonderful class at the Florida School of Woodworking. You are a very fine woodworker, furniture maker. Can't wait to talk to you about chairs. So why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into woodworking.
Okay. Well, hey, everybody. Kelly Parker. I design and make contemporary studio furniture, which when I embarked on this journey, I didn't know this was a thing. So like a lot of people, I started woodworking in high school. That's where I learned a love of tools and wood and working with my hands. But my high school, it was taught as an art class, not a shop class. So it had a little bit of a difference. So I went to a 5-year high school. I woodworked all 5 years. And then I went to university, got a degree in biochemistry, worked as a chemist in the corporate world for almost 18 years and didn't really have access to a shop during university and my corporate days. But I always stayed involved in woodworking somehow, mostly rough-in carpentry type things. So when we built our house, I started out as a rough-in carpenter, and then I was our trim carpenter, and then I was making like walnut handrails with spoke-shaped edges, and that sort of got me thinking about fine woodworking again. So after a successful career in the corporate world, but not really soul-filling career, I just ran for the edge of the cliff and dove off. I decided to become a furniture maker, which is completely and totally random. I had never made a single piece of furniture in my life when I made that decision. Have no idea where that inspiration came from. But yeah, I didn't have a plan. I'm usually a girl with a plan. And like I said, I just dove. So I decided I probably should get educated. So I spent the first year building my studio. So I turned a raw basement into a studio. A friend gave me every issue of Fine Woodworking magazine he had. So I read years and years and years worth of Fine Woodworking magazines. I went to my friends' shops to see what tools they had. So I researched tools, built out my shop, and then started taking design and technique classes, first at Mark Adams School just south of Indianapolis, and then at Anderson Ranch Art Center. Had a couple of key internships, and then, fast forward a dozen years later, I've got my own studio practice, and I'm making really curvy contemporary furniture. Yeah,
So awesome.
convoluted way.
It's like, how you got to woodworking, that's a little bit of your design style, a little bit of a loop to
Mm,
loop. We'll get there eventually, but
yeah.
clearly you were called to it. And that's just so interesting that you're not even sure where you found the inspiration for fine furniture. And to see those, it looks like scale models behind you. I mean, my goodness, you would think that, you've been doing this since childhood. It just seems to come so natural to you.
Yeah, I definitely have found my thing. Like all of this design, I had no idea was inside me. I never identified as an artist before. Even when I was taking art class in high school, I was always more of a scientist. So, like, I took every science class I could. So, identity for Kelly was scientist, not artist. So, yeah, this is a big switch. I had no idea any of this was inside me.
Wow, that is incredible. So, not only did you have this inside of you waiting to be explored, and it was something that made you happy, you're also really, really talented and good at it, and others are able to see that and recognize that. And one of those key internships was Michael Fortune, and I had sent you these questions ahead of time, but really interested to know, women have male mentors in this industry all the time. That's not something that's incredibly unique, but to have Michael Fortune is. So what was that like? Were there any additional challenges you think, because you were a woman, studying with someone with such a stature? What was it like?
So I have to say, like the whole time I'm driving there, it's like, what the hell am I doing? What the hell am I doing? What the hell am I doing? I don't know enough to go study with this guy. Oh my gosh, the negative self-talk, wow, was over the top. But I have to say, Michael is so gracious. He's so, like, he just shares his knowledge so easily. I mean, you see that on Instagram. If you've ever taken a class with him, there is not a question he will not answer. He'll give you his client list if you want his client list. So all of the things I was worried about did not come to pass. Michael is actually, he's very supportive of having women in the craft. So I felt incredibly fortunate for that. I didn't feel like I had to prove myself to him. I'd actually taken several classes with him, so he knew me and my work ethic and my work style. That was helpful. So the only thing, like, I do have a bit of a chip on my shoulder about being a woman in a man's world, and I want to make sure that I am not taken for granted. So, like, the first day that I was supposed to get coffee, it's like hands on hips. It's like, I'll get coffee if it's the intern's job to get coffee, but not because I'm the only woman in the room. So, and as it turned out, we all took turns getting coffee. So it was all fine. It was all fine. But it's like, I'm not doing this just because I'm the girl.
Right. Right.
So, yeah. But it was a really pivotal internship, just like my first one was. Because I learned best in sort of this full immersion experience. And it's really through Michael and other people like Scott Grove that I even knew furniture could be sculpture. So seeing his forms evolve, how he problem solved using jigs, how everything he does works off a center line, that really informed the way that I approach my work. And so my problem solving approach is all jig based. Like, I can't imagine doing what I do. Even if I'm doing a one-off thing, I can't imagine how I could possibly do it safely, repeatedly, and accurately without the use of jigs. So it was clearly a key stepping stone in my career development.
Very interesting. And I like that you brought up the coffee thing, because even though that situation, everything ended up being fine, we do have to go into, workshops, office buildings, wherever it is we may be. And there's that societal expectation that women get the coffee. And that's something that it's to the point where it aggravates us, where we're looking out for that whenever it happens. We aren't really sure what's going on. Is it, like you said, because I'm an intern, or because I'm the woman? And so,
yes.
Very interesting that even in extremely supportive situations, those things still pop up. Those things are still issues, and that's why it's important for conversations like this to happen, to say, hey, these things are still happening.
Yeah, it's sort of our default mindset. When you walk into a room like that and you're sort of the only one that looks like you, and you're asked to do something, you sort of question motivations, which isn't great on our part to question motivations, but there's just been too much history to not question motivations.
Yes, too much history, and unfortunately too many personal experiences. It's one thing to be like, oh, well, I've heard of that happening. Every single one of us, every, woman, female identifying person, or non-binary, has some sort of experience, story, situation, something that stands out to them. Oftentimes it hurts self-confidence. It feels like kind of a knockback, and it feels like, for me, hearing that happening so regularly, it's a knockback for our entire craft to see others, actively trying to hold others back in the shop. And that's extremely frustrating. But like I said, even in the most positive situations, those things pop up. And I am so glad and can attest to how supportive Michael Fortune is. He has been extremely supportive of the Women of Woodworking Project, and is always sending me recommendations, and is one of those people trying to, give a hand up, give a boost up, and not hold someone back. So, so that's wonderful. So, And thank you for doing the same and being on here and talking with me about this.
Just to tag on to that, I mean, that's sort of how I got my start in teaching, is because he liked to take me on the road as an assistant, because he felt like having a woman at the front of the class I might be more approachable than he is, especially to other women. And so, yeah, so that's sort of how I sort of got my segue into teaching, was assisting him frequently.
That's awesome. That's great. And I love hearing, that, inclusion is an intention. It is an intentional act. And that's what it takes, is doing things like that. And it's brilliant business wise, because women, we hold most of the spending power in our households. 80% of all household purchasing decisions are made by women. So to have someone up there that they can relate to, or say, hey, maybe I could do that. I mean, you're only growing. It's only good. And so that's really awesome. That's really cool. So, well, speaking about teaching, I believe it was at Fireweed Workshop. I heard you speak on a panel a couple weeks ago. And you had mentioned, about being mostly self-taught and reading lots of fine woodworking magazines. And now you're teaching a class at the Florida School of Woodwork at like a master level class. What is that like? How does that feel personally?
It's kind of crazy, honestly. I was a student for years. Like I said, I took design and technique classes at Mark Adams and would practice and just do experiments here. So I was the one in the back of the class, like rapidly taking down all these notes. And now I'm the one standing at the front of the class, and those people are taking down notes of things that I say. It's like, whoa. So like, I feel like I do have things to teach, things to say. But I also, it's like, holy cow, people paid to come to this class. They're paying lodging, they're paying meals, they paid for the class. It's like, I better be damn good, right? And so I sort of, I put a lot of pressure on myself to make sure that the students get more than what they bargained for. So I bring my all. But on the flip side, I feel like, my career is really only 10 years long. And so I feel like my knowledge is really shallow, but pretty broad. So in some ways, I sort of feel it's like that imposter syndrome. It's like, am I really qualified to be up here? So I sort of go back and forth. And like when I'm teaching a class, I look at my syllabus for everything I'm going to teach the next day. And I look things up on the internet to make sure that I'm saying exactly what is right. And I will say that being a woman teaching basically a man's craft, I feel like if a guy misstates something or has a misstep, that everybody's gonna, it's like, yeah, whatever, he made a mistake. But I feel like as a woman, like if I have a misstep, it is an instant knock to my credibility. Oh, well, what does she know? So I feel like I have to be like hyper perfect. Like I can't have a human error. I have to be perfect. And part of that is me, part of that is my personality, but I also feel like my credibility is a lot more fragile than a male colleague's credibility is, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, I can totally relate to that. Being a teacher, I too, like, I want to go above and beyond. Like I kind of want my students to be sick of me by the end of it and be like, just leave me alone, lady. Like, but I mean, that's the kind of student I was. And so that's what I tried to do for students as well. And feeling that pressure. It's really interesting. I feel like I can relate to you a lot, because that feeling of, wow, I'm getting these opportunities and doing this. It is that imposter syndrome. You're like, oh, they're gonna find out that I'm totally winging it here, and like feeling that pressure. And it's taken a long time, and I feel very fortunate to be able to talk to others about it, but like leaning into that and saying, these people are recognizing the talent, and clearly it's here, and believing in yourself. I think that's something that all artists, especially women, have to deal with. And I don't know if that's something that ever completely goes away. I think it's something that we probably just have to learn to manage. And I do think it escalates, like the more opportunities you get or the bigger stakes, you're like, ooh, but then also it's like, okay, clearly I keep having these opportunities pop up, like I'm doing something right, so I'm just going to keep going and hoping it works out.
So it's interesting. We were speaking earlier, and I'm doing your Tell Your Story class. And so today I wrote about confidence. And confidence is something that I've struggled with my whole life. And which is kind of crazy because I've never not been able to do a thing I've set out to do. Okay. Riding a motorcycle, check. Rock climbing, check. Like everything I've wanted to do, I've been able to do. So I don't know where this constant struggle comes from. But on the positive side, I feel like I clearly have a voice. Like I have my own unique voice out there. I'm making good work that I can feel proud of. And putting it out there on social media, holy cow, talk about being vulnerable. But I hope it's not braggadocio or anything like that. But I feel like I can take it. If someone wants to throw hate on a project I just did, let them. In my heart, I know it is good work. And so it's really weird to be identifying as an artist now and having confidence in the work in a really public forum. And yeah, and I know I'm not there. I know I still have tons to learn and more work to do, but what I put out there, I feel really, really happy with.
It's the playing field for having artists like engage their audience, engage like customers or patrons or whatever you would want to call people that, follow your work. It's totally flipped on its head. Before it was kind of like, you need to be humble. It wasn't really cool to like, oh, I'm an artist, people kind of making fun of that. But the world is totally different. And I think the ways that people can make a living through their art has changed so much too. It's like kind of leveled things out. And it is a challenge for a lot of people to build confidence in that. It's interesting because talking about being other women in the craft, I feel like my own perspective now is completely skewed. I'm like, oh, I hang out with women in woodworking all the time. Like, of course I do, it's my job. But having these conversations with y'all keeps me very humble because it reminds me, okay, this is why I still do this project, is because everybody else, it's not that way beyond, the four walls of my studio. And I think it takes a lot of practice to build confidence. I think a lot of things happen throughout your life. I've definitely had situations that have left me feeling pretty unconfident for a while. But since I've started teaching this class, it's been amazing how many people that you would think, oh, they never, I want to be like them, like they're totally confident. They know what they're doing. They're like, oh no, like we all kind of go through these ebbs and flows, and it's very, very natural. And I think just figuring out what works best for you is obviously, going to work, but then also giving yourself the freedom to explore that. We had talked about, not messing up my sketchbooks and things like that. Again, knowing part of the process is making mistakes. Sometimes you are going to stumble and fall and lose confidence. It's just going to happen. And I think the sooner that people accept, hey, I'm going to mess up, at least once I'm going to mess up. At least once I'm going to say something that didn't feel right, or I didn't speak up when I felt like I should. And it's to me more important to be extremely like forgiving of yourself and accepting of that. And like, hey, that's part of the process. And you learn from what you don't say and share as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so very interesting. So, well, I'm glad that you're enjoying the class, and don't worry, it is like very much go at your own pace. And part of that is because of the type of class it is. Some of us need more time to kind of process some of these things and create these habits. And I'll be very honest, the first time one of my teachers one of my professors in college gave me this journal exercise to do, I didn't do very well. I blocked myself, and I maybe, you know, out of this like composition notebook, maybe had like 20 or so pages of just whatever I tried to like throw down on paper, you know, 2 or 3 days before it was due. And it was very obvious that I didn't let myself explore. And like, it was her notes on that afterwards of just kind of like, it was kind of like your mom being like, I'm disappointed, you know, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. And it was kind of that feeling of like, you know, you didn't, you know, take this gift that I was giving you. And it really kind of made me think like, wow, I should have let myself have 5 minutes a day, you know, to do that. And that's what made me realize, okay, I really need to apply this to my daily routine. And what really made me see the benefits out of it, because I resisted it hard at first. So yeah. All right, enough about that. Anyway, back to you and your winding story. So you started out as a chemist and made this huge career change, you know, and I love hearing that, because so many of us did that. You know, we've worked in the corporate world, or we're in college and we're like, this is not it. And, you know, to find something like fine woodworking and furniture making is just so unique. Do you have any advice for someone out there that is maybe thinking about making a huge career change like that, or is going through that? Go ahead.
So I'm in this pretty unique position. So I had this really high-paying corporate job. I lived frugally. So I had, you know, a fairly sizable savings account that allowed me to self-fund, you know, building out my shop and buying my tools. And it also affords me the opportunity to say no. So I can turn down work that I don't want to do. And I know that that is an incredibly powerful situation, and an incredibly lucky situation to be in, to be able to turn down work I don't want to do. Because I've had people tell me, if you don't want to build cabinets, don't make cabinets, because the minute you make cabinets, somebody's going to see that you make cabinets and going to ask you to make cabinets. Yeah, so I had a pretty sizable financial nest egg to help me sort of launch this thing. And the other thing, I have a super supportive husband, you know, both financially and emotionally. He did not point out the fact, hey, you've never built furniture before. You thinking clear here? So that was helpful. But I will say, Katie, if I would have overthought this, if I would have put one iota of thoughts like, holy cow, you don't have clients, how much money do you need to make? What about insurance? If I would have overthought it, I never would have done it. So none of that is really good advice. Like truly, like if you're going to start a business, like you need to have a business plan, right? So yeah, for me, it was not overthinking it, and just knowing that I sort of had this safety net to fall back on, kind of gave me the freedom to run off and do this crazy thing.
Yeah.
Not everybody's in this situation. I clearly know that it is a luxury to be able to turn down work that I don't want to do.
That is such a valuable point, because that was something I really struggled with. I know my husband and I really struggled with when we started working together. He was at a point in his career where he was starting to get away from that and starting to be able to say no. And then, you know, I come in and think, all right, we do need to do all these things. We've got to make money. And there is such a higher cost than you can realize sometimes. And like, sometimes you don't realize you're in the middle of a project. Sometimes you know it going in there, oh, this is going to suck and I'm going to lose my behind, but I've got to do it. But holy cow, to get to that point where you can be like, no, I'm sorry, thank you for thinking of me, but you know, I'm going to have to pass. Oh my gosh. Like, talk about a weight lifted off of you. And then also the direction that your career goes in from there. I feel like kind of the projects that you want to do start to naturally find you more frequently than those, you know, other jobs that you know, would have paid the bills, but wouldn't necessarily been what you wanted to do.
And so part of this is, I want to satisfy my soul, right? I want to enjoy what I do every day. And like, work that I've turned down is if someone brings me a picture from a magazine, hey, can you build this? it's like, I don't really want to build that, but I'd be happy to design something and build my interpretation of that. So I have like zero passion around building somebody else's idea of furniture, like none. So that's going to be just like being in my corporate job. I'm just going through the motions. But if it's something I've designed that I now have to problem solve, now I'm engaged. So that's what saying no has allowed me to do. Like, I don't want to, like, I'm the world's slowest woodworker. Like, a big project is going to take me 2 or 3 months, right? And I don't want to spend 2 or 3 months on a thing I really don't want in my portfolio. So, I'm building my portfolio with work I really want to do. So I don't have to curate out the bad projects out of my portfolio. Everything that's in there is work I've wanted to do. And again, I know I'm in like such a lucky place to be able to do that.
Yeah, it can take a lot of work to get there, but you learn so much through that process, emotionally, financially, of course. And then I think you get to a point where you're like, okay, like I'm not enjoying this anymore, and making other people's ideas and things like that. That's such a good point. So I guess if I had to answer my own question, I would have to say, what Kelly said, and get to making what moves you and what interests you as quickly as possible, because you're right. If your heart's not into a project, those are the ones that they end up languishing in your shop longer than they need to be. You're like, I'll do it tomorrow. I'm going to go do this. And then it just kind of like hovers and like kind of grows and like this, becomes this like monster sitting in your shop, just a source of anxiety. And so yeah, not taking on projects like that, it's different in being a creator, and especially like woodworking. It's such a time intensive craft. It's a real commitment, and that's really important.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is absolutely a commitment. It is not a casual pursuit at all. I think what people are most surprised by is the fact that it's not this like linear progression from my technical drawing to the finished piece. There's a lot of, figuring things out, because I'm building something that the world has never seen before. I can't Google how to make this. People are going to be Googling me to figure out how to make this. And I think that's the thing that took me the longest time to get comfortable with, was that figuring out the build is the job, right? I designed this thing, but then I got to figure out how to make it, because I am not thinking about how to make it when I design at all. Because if I self-censor, just like, oh, I don't know how to do a curved cabinet door, I'm not going to draw a curved cabinet door, then I feel like I wouldn't grow. And so I don't think, like, I turn that side of my brain off. It's like, I guess I approach it more like a sculptor. I want to create this form. It just happens to be furniture. But once I have a form that I want to pursue, then I have to put in all the headwork to figure out, how do I pull off this crazy idea that I just came up with? And Katie, when I first started, it's hard. It's like, okay, clearly I'm not smart enough to do this, because I am not happy being in that ambiguous, I don't know what the next step is space. And like, I still go through that with every project. I get to a point, it's like, what the hell were you thinking? Like, clearly this is above your skill level. But then I get it figured out and I move on. But that was the hardest thing for me to get comfortable with, was like not having a clear path and not knowing what I'm doing. But that's the job. That's what studio furniture is all about. It's never been done before. So you're in this whole figuring it out thing, and that's what you do.
How wonderful that you put yourself into that space where you're going to be a little uncomfortable, but that's where the good ideas are going to be found. And yeah, I mean, not only trying to figure out how to build it, then you got to figure out how to build the jig to build it, so many things. And, watching my own husband in this process, you're right. It's not linear. And it was very hard for me to understand that at first. And I'm sure you, as a chemist, are probably like very used to having things like in orders and steps, and, ending up with results. And so there were times I was just like, you're all over the place. He's like, no, there's a method to the madness, and learning that and appreciating that. It was fun, and it really makes it beautiful, because it is kind of like looking at this puzzle, and pieces are turned over sideways under a couch somewhere, and you're like finding them and putting them together, and then at the end you have this beautiful piece. So this is a perfect segue into my next question, which is, what do you like to build the most?
Oh, wow. Gosh, this is going to be a surprising answer. I'm going to say there's two things. Boxes is one, but I don't even call them boxes anymore, because what do you think of when you hear the word box? 4 square sides, square lid, right? Mama don't do right angles. So I've started calling my boxes vessels, because they're more like little sculptures. But also, I don't want to be identified as a box maker. I keep making that clear. I don't want to be identified as a box maker. But these little vessels are like these beautiful sculptural objects. It's a very, very contained project, and you can learn so much from them. They're beautiful canvases for embellishment. So I would say vessels is one thing, and then wall mirrors is the other thing, because again, I think a wall mirror can be like this incredible, incredible sculpture, and they're never square, right? They're never just round. Yeah, but yeah, I feel like, again, it's a small, contained, very sculptural project that you can do and learn a technique. Want to learn steam bending? Well, let's steam bend a frame. It's small, it's approachable, it's not like a chair that it has to have any kind of structure. You got to plan on a 350-pound beefy dude slamming his body weight down into it. So, yeah.
Yes, you can build quite a wide variety of types of work. And so, yeah, seeing this, I'm surprised you didn't pick seating, but then your answers make sense as to why not. So that was really interesting. So thank you for that.
And I guess part of that is, like, it does take so stinking long, and like a box or a wall mirror, they're much shorter projects, and sometimes I just need a quick fix. You know what I mean? I need something it's like, yay, look what I did. Seating is, oh my goodness, seating. So I've made one chair in my life, my Penelope Cruz chair, and now I've made one bench, and now I've made a bar stool. So seating has got a lot of challenges with it. Yeah, it has a lot higher requirements as a functional object.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So, what is something that you have learned but didn't expect to learn as a furniture maker?
So I think that would go back to the not knowing what I'm doing and having to be comfortable in that space of trying to figure it out. I thought that once I design a thing, that I would just march through and make that thing. I didn't realize there was going to be this whole fumbling around and figuring it out, and like literally holding a part in my hand and walking tool to tool with the part oriented the way that I would feed it into the machine, and figuring out which tool is best to do this next thing that I want to do. Like, I thought it would just be this linear thing. It's like, okay, design, step, done. But no, there's so much time involved in figuring it out. And that was what was surprising to me. That's, that whole, I'm not smart enough to do this thing. It's like, no, that's just the process. You're smart enough. It's just hard. It's not easy. It's hard, actually.
Absolutely. So, what is something you'd like to see more of for underrepresented folks in the craft and trade industries?
So, yeah, that's a tricky one. And I kind of have two answers for that. I think different looking people, okay? More faces, more body types, more gender, color at the front of the class. I had the president of a woodworking guild ask me once what I thought about female-only classes. And it's like, ugh. If you're not that whatever only, then you feel excluded. And exclusion never feels good, right? But on the flip side, I can understand, because I've been the only woman in a class, and you got 16 guys behind you, and you're on a tool that you're not really comfortable with, and those 16 guys tapping their feet behind you does not help you feel comfortable on that tool. So, creating sort of a safe space for a woman to learn about tools and the vocabulary and how to use them, and then her having the confidence to go play with the boys next time, like I see value in that. So I'm sort of, two sides of that, but really to me, just having more different looking people at the front of the class, it's a very subtle thing. It's like, oh, I can look like that person and do this, right? So I think I'd rather see that than more, purple-eyed, four-legged monster class is really what I'd like to see, is more representation at the front of the class than a class for this category of people.
Very interesting. And you're right. Having someone up there that looks like you or doesn't look like you, both sides can be like, hey, like, all right, I belong here. And, so yeah, great. Well, thank you for that answer. Well, is there anything else you'd like to touch on that we haven't talked about yet?
I guess maybe the only other thing I would say is, sort of, finding your personal voice and your aesthetic along the way. The other thing that's turned out to be really important to me is story and the concept of story and the story behind the lumber that I use. Like, I never buy lumber. I never have to go to the hardwood supplier and buy lumber because people give me trees, right? So I have a sawyer that I work with. They'll mill it to my exact specifications. I've got drying sheds in my backyard where it dries for a couple of years before I can turn it into furniture. But I know the pedigree of every board in my shop and every tree in my drying shed. And when I build a piece, I tell the story of that piece. And I feel like we have enough stuff. We don't need another XYZ. But if that XYZ is built out of the sycamore tree that your grandpa planted 50 years ago, then all of a sudden that piece has more value, more emotional connection. And that is something that I really like, is knowing the story and the history and the backstory of the material that I use. So I love to tell a story, but I especially love to tell your story. So if I harvest a tree off of your property, or if a tree came down in a storm, and if you can stick with me for the 2 years it's going to take for that lumber to dry and me to design and make a piece, that is the best. That's how I really, really like to work.
Oh, wow. That's really awesome. So whenever you're, obviously, if somebody brings you a tree or is ordering like, a custom commissioned piece off of, something that's very sentimental to them, how do you select wood when it's something that you're just kind of making for yourself or just your own original idea? What goes into that selection process?
Gosh, so I do a lot of steam bending. So if I'm going to steam bend a part, I need a steam bendable wood, one that I have air dried out in my shop. I'll be thinking about what embellishments maybe I want to do. Like right now, I am crazy about a sandblasted texture on ash. So the bar stools that I recently finished, like I knew right off the bat they were going to be sandblasted. And ash is just so, so beautiful when it's sandblasted. You just get this really great texture. So I'll thinking about like the technical requirements I need out of the timber, and then also what embellishments I might do. Like if I want to do a lot of pyrography, wood burning, then I'm going to want something that is not like ash or oak or pine, where there's a big difference in the density between the early wood and the late wood. I want something that's more homogeneous because it's easier to wood burn and get a nicer effect out of. So I'm thinking both, technical requirements of the piece, of the timber, and then also embellishment wise, what I may consider.
Very cool. And I like hearing about the embellishments because your work, to me, it does feel like a very complete story, like a complete piece. And I feel like the embellishments and the attention to that is what makes that feeling happen, which kind of sets it apart. I oftentimes think people want to skip over those things or over those little details that just take a piece to the next level, whether it's time, whether it's what the client is paying, or just that's just not what they do. But that is one thing that I absolutely love about your work. So I like hearing that from you, that such intention, I can tell the attention goes to that. So
yeah, details are everything. Like you can tell the difference between good design and bad design. You may not be able to articulate it, but you can definitely see it. And to me, paying attention to the details, even if it's beyond the scope of maybe what the project is paying, at this point in my career, it's really important. So I feel like it's an investment in me and my portfolio and my career, even if I'm technically not getting paid for that by the client. To me, it's important to do those things. But thank you for noticing. I appreciate that.
yes, absolutely. Well, awesome. Well, Kelly, how can people get in touch with you and see more of your work and your class schedule also?
Okay, so my website was recently redesigned and I'm loving it. So that's where you can find my class schedule, and that is woodsongstudio.com, all one word, woodsongstudio.com. And if you're into the Instagram thing, I'm Kelly Parker 2017. And I do tons of process shots and finished shots and, oh, look at this jig I created, and yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for we have almost every bit of an hour, and it has just been so awesome. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was great chatting with you too.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. Take care.
Okay, thanks. Bye.